So to start out the podcast here, I actually wanted to talk about something a little bit different. So there are time codes in the description, and if this doesn't interest you, totally fine. Feel free to skip ahead to whatever topic you want to listen to. But I wanted to actually give a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how this podcast is made and why. Because I've been getting some comments that have been raising some points of confusion as to, wait, why is it like this? And why is this video coming out at this day? And what's going on here? And why do you do it like this? And I thought, I just think it would be better to distill all of this into one segment so that in case anyone's ever confused, I can always, as long as this model of the podcast continues, I can always point to this and hopefully this will make a lot of sense. So again, if you don't want to listen to this to start out the podcast, totally fine. It's here in case people are curious, and then you can always go into the time codes in the description and skip ahead to whatever segment you want to listen to. So here's what happens. Every week, right? I wait throughout the week and I compile these stories, these breaking news stories and different, episodes of television and movies that I watch and whatnot that are relevant. I compile all of these things and sometimes even record them earlier in advance. So, for example, if a piece of breaking news, let's just say Spider-Man 4 is titled Spider-Man Venom Verse. Spider-Man Venom Verse, okay. And that's a story that comes out on Tuesday. I have a running list every week of topics that I want to discuss, and then I write them down. And sometimes if it's more important for me to be, to have my mind fresh, for example, with the AGATHA reviews or with the Penguin reviews, I usually record them right after because I think it's a benefit instead of having to record everything in one shot, which it's just me talking and it can be quite exhausting. I've tried this before, where I just compile all the topics and then wait until the last day, and then I record it all, I edit it all, and it's exhausting. My voice is shot usually, and so at least for some segments, especially in those segments where I think it's beneficial for my thoughts to be fresh, like TV reviews, I just record them right after, and then I save those segments for later, and I compile them all into the podcast that you hear at the end of the day. So anyways, going back to the process again, I compile these stories. Let's say Spider-Man Venomverse is announced on Tuesday, and let's say that I really think I need to talk about it right then so that I don't forget certain things that I want to talk about. I'll record it Tuesday evening as a kind of individual clip, but then we'll be able to hold on to that until I compile them all. So then usually what the process is that on Friday, I have all the stories collected. I know what I want to talk about. I know what I've already been talking about. And from there, it's a matter of maybe I have a few stories that I need to record. And then I record them on Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and then I put them all together. And so at this point here, we have the podcast in its raw form, in its audio form, right? Because I have all of these segments put together. Now, if I was just doing an audio-only podcast, that would be it, pretty much. I could just upload it on Friday evening and be done with it, right? But I also have the YouTube channel. Actually, the YouTube channel is the primary way in which people can access the podcast. And what I've realized is that there are some people who really enjoy listening to the hour to sometimes 2 hours. I think that was the longest podcast episode I did, 2 hours long. Crazy. I did not do that one in one sitting. I did that in a few segments throughout the week. But that one, podcasts it's not for everyone, right? I totally understand. So because of that, I thought, and I tried this out, and it seemed pretty successful because people who had not, who did not usually engage with the longer podcasts were able to find the YouTube channel and the podcast through these clips that I post. And so what I do is that usually on Saturdays, although it's changed recently with the Penguin, which I'll talk about in just a second, but usually what I'll do is on Friday, I'll finish up the podcast and then I'll put the whole thing up on Saturday and as a YouTube video, right? But then throughout the rest of the week, I will have broken up the podcast into segments, and then I will be releasing those segments throughout the week. And that's why some of the segments are about things that have happened maybe 5-6 days ago, and that's because they're originally from the podcast. So I've gotten questions like, wait, this happened a week ago. Why are you still talking about it? It's because I talked about it actually not the day the news came out, because I just think the model for me personally and what I'm doing in my life, it's not sustainable for me to every single time a piece of breaking news drops, I just can't run to a microphone and upload a video. It's just not sustainable, for me. And so doing the weekly podcasts and recording them by Friday is what I do. And so, yeah, I usually post the full podcast on Saturday. I split it up into clips, and that's why sometimes the clips, come out a little bit later. And that's why you'll see an Agatha review, maybe not on Wednesday night when the episode comes out, but maybe on a Monday or a Sunday, for example. So that's one question I've heard a lot is why, for example, the Jon Stewart news, that was crazy because we got new news about that pretty much every other day. And so some of the clips were a little bit outdated, but still it was fun to talk about them nonetheless. Now, people have also asked me about the format of the podcast, like as in the video format of the podcast. Why do you just use pictures, right? Why do you just rely on doing kind of a slideshow format? A couple specific reasons for that. Number one, because you'll know, actually, for those of you who have been sticking around the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel for a long while now, I did almost exclusively edited videos before. And I probably still will at some point. I probably will get back to that, eventually, maybe do them once in a while. They were fun. They were definitely fun. They were more scripted, right? Because another comment that I got was, why is this, why aren't you cutting out things and leaving in some pauses and, things like that and just talking, right? And I told them because this is a podcast. I understand that if I clip part of the podcast, right? If I clip part of the segments and put them on YouTube, that it looks like a traditional YouTube video. But that's why I'm very clear in the description of these videos, of these segments, which I know a lot of people don't usually read the description of YouTube videos. Totally fine. But that's why I put them there, is to tell them this is a clip from the Access Blockbusters pod, which is in full, in a separate video. And so that's another question that I've gotten. But basically, I used to do edited videos. And the thing about edited videos, right, is that let's say I record for about 12 minutes. 12 minutes of recording, if I'm fast, is maybe 2 to 3 hours of editing, video editing. Not to mention something like a 20-minute video, for example. If I were to try to edit an entire hour-long podcast into a video format where it's, actual videos and clips and things like that going on in the background, it would take me probably 2 weeks to do, to make sure that it's up to, it's up to the kind of standard that I like to have. And that is just simply not sustainable for me. I'm also not at the point where I can hire an editor or anything like that. And so for the time being, the best compromise that I could give, because I could also just put the entire podcast up with no visuals and just put up my logo. And I used to do that actually, because when I was first experimenting with this podcast, and I thought, it still takes some time to compile all the pictures and do all those things, but it takes much less time. And I figure people would much rather see some pictures of what I'm talking about, even if it doesn't line up one-to-one, if it doesn't line up with exactly what I'm saying. If I'm talking about the penguin, it's not the exact scene always with the picture, but it's just because I figure it's better to give, something to look at than nothing at all. And people have asked me, like, why can't you do, why can't it be one-to-one? Why can't it be every single thing you're talking about is the picture that's on the screen? And I would love to do that. But even that, right, is adding, for an hour and a half long podcast, that would add at least 2 to 3, 4 hours of time. And it's not that I don't want to put in that time. It's just that I don't have that time. Because if I want to upload the podcast on Friday to come out on Saturday, then I would basically be spending all of Friday night doing that. Because this isn't something I could really be working on throughout the week necessarily, because Friday is the day when all the things come together, right? Friday is the day when I compile all of my old recordings and whatnot, and then come together and make this. And at that point, I'm doing the final touches. I'm writing the descriptions, the tags, and all that kind of stuff, and uploading all the pictures and doing all those things. And so that process alone will take me a few hours usually, and I'm happy to do it. It's fun, right? But I'm just to kind of give some transparency, if I were to, even just try to have edited clips in there, or try to match up every 10 seconds, with what I'm talking about with the right picture, it would probably kill me. It probably would kill me. And I'm just trying to balance, I think at the end of the day, what I'm hoping is an entertaining product, because again, podcasts are primarily audio formats, right? There's a reason that we have a Spotify platform, but I'm happy to put it on YouTube because YouTube is my, platform of choice, and that's where I get to interact with all of you guys. And that's been awesome. And so, that's the reason that the podcast is the way that it is. Sometimes, right? going back to the Penguin, sometimes I will make an exception because, I'll finish compiling everything for the week on Friday and I'll have the podcast ready to go by Saturday. But sometimes I think that it's better to release a clip earlier because every single day that passes, it's going to lose relevance, right? That's why I don't release these segmented clips in order that they were in, the same order that they were in the podcast, because if I release the Agatha All Along episode 5 review 3 days after episode 6 came out, not really, worth it for me. As it is, I'm releasing the Penguin spoiler discussions the day before the next episode comes out. It's not ideal. It is absolutely not ideal, but it's sort of the best thing I can do given the way that I, run production on these podcast episodes. And so that's why you'll see the Penguin spoiler discussion for episode 6, for example, come out on Saturday, and then the full podcast with that clip in it come out the next day, just because I want to get that Penguin, spoiler discussion out as early as I can, which I know is still only a day earlier, but the alternative is that it comes out after the next episode. And I think at that point, it's just really not worth, releasing the segment at all. So hopefully that gives you guys, for those of you who are curious and for those of you who had questions about the Access Blockbusters pod, that gives you some insight into why I'm doing what I'm doing. I could totally be changing up the format at any point, but this has been working pretty well for me thus far, and I've been pretty happy with it. So yeah, if any more questions arise, let me know in the comments, and would love to talk about it there with you guys.